Welcome, everybody, to today's conversation with myself and Naomi. It's our day 2, as far as you're concerned. I don't know how many, it's been a bunch of days. It's not been a week, but here we are. We spoke about a whole lot of different stuff the first time, and today what we wanted to do is go in deeper into certain aspects because there's no point of us talking about something and not going deep into it, and especially coming from the coaching world, the self-development world, the uh, the yogic realm, as you might call it, the spiritual realm, and also the entrepreneurial
Mhm.
world. I don't know what you would call it here, but essentially, what we're here today to talk about is the masculine and the feminine dynamics, the energetics of it, how all that comes together within oneself and in one's relationships,
Mm.
and also about love. And we're going to talk about a few other things that pertain to this. The word or the term that's coming to my mind is spiritual bypassing, which could be seen as a consequence of separating the spiritual from the material, the subtle from the gross. But essentially, what we're going to do is reframe. How do we look at the spiritual as a path to enhance the material, to enhance one's experience inside out? So these are just some things. And Naomi, is there anything else? I think I might have missed out a few things, but we are going to talk about.
That's okay. I think you did great. Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, I think we're going to get started. Naomi, I
Yes.
shared a few things with you, and I'm going to share this with everybody now. So, what we talked about was this was a presentation that a coach did, and you know what? Before I get into that the 3 core needs of the feminine and 3 core needs of the masculine, I'm going to share a quote. We were just talking about this quote. It's a quote by James Baldwin.
Mhm.
Love is when you can take off the masks you feared you couldn't live without and knew you couldn't live within. What does that even mean, right? Like, but just the depth of vulnerability. So I'm going to repeat that,
Mhm.
and I'm going to come close to the mic for all of you to listen. I hope you like my voice. Love. Some ASMR. Love is when you can take off the masks you feared you couldn't live without and knew you couldn't live within, by James Baldwin. So, what are we going to do here? I'm going to talk about the 3 core needs of the masculine and 3 core needs of the feminine. This is something that a coach had shared in a private group that I was in. This was a few years ago, and here they are. This is not something I came up with. Now, this is not necessarily something between two people as a male and a female, but think of it as energies. There's one energy, there's and the attribute of masculine energy and the attribute of feminine energy. So how do we take both of those and allow them to work together? Because what you have are 2 different energies, the yin and the yang, that come together to create something extraordinary, right?
Mhm.
On so many levels.
Mhm.
So let's talk about this.
Mhm.
I'm going to say the 3 core needs of the feminine. I'm going to say the 3 core needs of the masculine. And then I'm going to share with you how they can come together and be managed so that it becomes a virtuous cycle. All right.
Mhm.
So the 3 core needs of the feminine, and this is something, even if you're a man, you can relate to it. One is to feel seen, held, safe. 2 is to feel safe, not victimized and not in threat of danger. And 3 is to feel heard and to be heard. Now, these are not things that are just for the woman, but these are things for the man as well, because this is the feminine attribute which exists in all of us. And when you're in this space, in my experience, I'm sure for many of you, this is when you actually feel you can be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when you don't have that, when you are not receiving this in your environment, when you're not receiving this from the people around you, it becomes very difficult. Have you ever been in a social environment, maybe in a workplace, where you just couldn't show up and be yourself? Then some of these needs were not being met. In threat of danger,
Mhm.
right? Like, holy shit. So these are the 3 core needs of the feminine. Now, what are
Mhm.
the 3 core needs of the masculine? And this is going to be relatable a lot for the men. It is for me especially. One is have the space to do what you need to do. 2, to have freedom to choose what it is that you desire, right? Maybe it's autonomy, one way of saying it, or agency. And 3, to be opened up by feminine. So if you might already be noticing this, but if all 3 needs are met within the individual, then you can probably flower. And if there's 2 people that are contributing to each other in these ways, then that is something even more profound. How do we make this happen? And how do we not only leverage it, but how do we measure that we're on the right path? So I'm going to tell you how these come together. Right. So if she doesn't feel heard, she will not feel seen. She does not feel seen, she will not feel safe. If she does not feel safe, she will not speak. If she disengages because she doesn't feel seen or safe, it destroys the relationship, right? So you see how it all starts with her feeling heard, her feeling seen, her feeling understood, her feeling safe. And if that doesn't happen, she's going to disengage. And when she disengages, destroys the relationship. So she must be heard, she must speak. And if she doesn't, the masculine's needs won't be met either. And what happens if the masculine's needs are not met? You don't have the space. The masculine doesn't have the space to do what it needs to do. It doesn't have the freedom to choose. And it's because it's not opened up by the feminine.
Yeah. Deep stuff.
These are the energetics of, and this is a transparency of how the masculine and the feminine hold each other. So what does it mean? What do you do? Well, you show up, you make sure she feels heard and seen and safe. She opens him up, he steps into the provider role, and this virtuous cycle continues. So that's the solution. Naomi, what's coming up for you? You have decades of experience of life beyond me. I am curious to hear. I'm sure the audience is here. And not when I say decades of experience, she has like 30 years of coaching, therapy, all that. So that is something I'm sure she has a whole lot to share regarding this aspect. So let's go deep, man. Like, dude, like fucking
Yeah.
crush it. Go all the way. Share everything.
Wow. And I also have a history of relationship, of which I have, I would say learned through experience, what so many layers of this. But yeah, one of the things that came up for me first off when you said, the needs of the feminine and the needs of the masculine is, a core dynamic in this dance, say in a relationship with two people, one feminine, one masculine. If the woman, the feminine, does not feel seen, does not feel held, and does not, that doesn't make, that's what creates safety, is feeling connected, seen, and held. I mean, I could go more deeply into this stuff because there's like, I've studied masculine and feminine dynamics quite a lot because I've failed so miserably.
Another thing I want to say, this
Yeah.
this reminds me of something you mentioned last time. So just to open up that door as right as you get into it, because I want you to get into this. It sounds traditional, right? It sounds hyper traditional to many people, but this is also something I personally appreciate. I personally, this resonates with me, it aligns with me. And one thing I would also say is a quote from you, something you shared earlier. I think you should share it again. The men austerities and women safe space quote. What was it? Say it in your way.
Yeah, so I had a teacher who talked about very much in the Vedic tradition of Adi Shankara and all that, talked about men evolve most better in austerity and women evolve better in affluence. So there's a way that if you think about
And
It's
affluence means what? Affluence is probably the word that I can't say for sure, but I would think affluence was chosen in regard to safety. Affluence meaning that it gave safety.
100%, because when you have what you need in terms of food, shelter, like all the things that make a person,
This does assume emotional safety.
of course, but even physically, as a feminine being, if you feel like you're not in survival mode, that allows your nervous system to drop into creative, into the space where you can pursue the higher levels of development. And even Sadhguru talks about this a little bit in the way that when he talks about um like villagers and certain people at a certain level of survival in the world, like he would never go there and talk to them about evolving and spirituality.
See, there's layers of needs. Like you can't
Yes,
jump from
yes,
level one need.
exactly.
You can jump to level 10 when you're not even done level one. Some people can. It just depends on how much you want at level one, how much
It's
you want
true.
at
And
level.
we are totally generalizing here. There's always going to be exceptions. This is not about like lines in the sand or anything. Anything we talk about really is more of an exploration and more to just like give you awareness to kind of reflect on your own life experiences. It's
Yeah,
not
and
about,
also that particular story with Sadhguru was he's not gonna go to somebody who's starving for food and try to talk to them about enlightenment. That was the point.
yeah, exactly. So then the reason I brought that up is because there's a certain level of, yeah, like safety that when that is there, people can go into creative mode and pursue more like uh, evolutionary things. They're not as much in survival, so their energy can go somewhere else besides just survival. And yeah, so I think that's really what it means when he says affluence. Um, so yeah, um, and in terms of the feminine really feeling seen, held, safe. So the feminine feels safe because if you want to kind of go, because that was one thing I was going to say earlier, is that when you're talking about this, you said not victimized, no threat, no danger as a feminine need. Okay, so what I'd like to point out is that there are levels and layers of needs and ways we function as human beings and influences in terms of our experience and navigating our experience. So one thing I'm really aware of is like their primal animalistic needs. And there are different kind of a hierarchy of that.
And when you think of that, Maslow's comes up for me. Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes up for me as an image that people can look up.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So in terms of like the no threat and no danger, it's like, we as females were gatherers. Men were more the hunters, right? And females were more the gatherers. So in gathering mode, we felt safe when we were connected in community, right? And so women kind of do everything in their power to stay connected. So there's a way that like feeling seen, feeling held is feeling safe. Feeling connected is feeling safe. So one thing like what you said about the men is that, or the masculine is they need to be received by the feminine. And that's, I would say, to be honest with you, that's very, very rare these days.
What's rare? Can you sum it up?
A man, a masculine man to be truly deeply received by a feminine, whether it's his partner, probably, if we're talking about partners.
Why is that?
And
Is
this
it
is
because
why I'm bringing
the
it up.
world is pushing everybody towards masculinity?
Yes. And also, I also think that without cultivating, because of all the things that are, kind of in our world, where right now the makeup of our realities and our existence is so much more complex, at least that we can see and experience complex than it used to be, say, if you lived in a village and that was like your whole entire world. So there's a way that, like, and Sadhguru talks about this too, where the feminine has been kind of, you know, sort of becoming more and more eradicated from the way the world functions.
What you appreciate appreciates, and the world has been depreciating femininity.
Yes. And it's very rare for the feminine to feel truly seen, held, and safe in this world because of, the fast pace and all the things and all these different layers. So,
Like the rat race, basically. The world is bombarding us on a virtual level and a physical social level. And that just becomes very difficult for the feminine to flower.
it's true. And you have to at least for me, either that's naturally there, or you have to consciously create it. And my experience, definitely in this country, which is the US or more Western countries these days, we have to consciously create it. I was just, like, as I talked about last time, I was just in India, and my friends, he's an Ayurvedic physician. He also has a big company who makes herbs and all these things. And the way his life is set up really allows his wife to be truly feminine. Now, she works in the business too. She does some of the finances. And she's very busy, and, they host international guests constantly. They're constantly traveling, but there's a way that, like, I know this is sort of, there's a way that the way she's supported and the way that she's tended to, and the environment of their relationship and their life is very much about allowing her to stay in femininity, which
I'm
is
glad
really,
you brought this up because
really,
there's a couple, yeah. So there's a few things I wanted to talk about, and I think this is the perfect time to bring that up and ask questions because you just opened up the door. One is the individual needs and how the society is set up in order to serve those needs, and vice versa. We give and they give to us and we receive more, right? You give and you receive more than you give without even asking. And that's sort of like how sometimes, oftentimes, existence ends up. So there is that aspect. And when I look at it, I ask, okay, well, what can a man do today to create an environment to be supportive to a woman for uh, for her needs as a human being? What does a human being require? Like just on a basic level, the human being needs to ensure that they have their basic survival needs met, right? Like food, shelter, internet, whatever. Include internet in that. But
fast.
yeah, but that's one part of it. Okay, great. Now my belly is full. It's like if you're hungry, you have one problem, but if you're once you're full, you have like a million problems. So okay, now I have food, I have shelter. What's next, right? So beyond that, what is it that one can do to be supportive for the other person for her to flower, right? For her to reach her full potential as well, but not in the same way that I would be but probably in a different kind of way that would be supportive for her as a woman, for her to explore the femininity and explore certain other aspects of life. But maybe it's I'm putting things in a box and people don't want to do that, right? Like that may also be wrong. Maybe that's and so it's more like I'm not here to say this is black and white and I want to put them in these boxes, but more of one thing is for certain that for every single human being, there's a certain kind of environment that should be created for them to arrive at where they need to arrive, for their unique genius to blossom, right? And so there's two things here. One is what's required at an individual level, but two, on a general level, there's definitely some similarities and patterns to go about, right? So if a man is watching this, what can he do in order to create that kind of environment? And it also depends on the stage of evolution and the stage of life that they're in. So what do I mean by that? I know a bunch of people, and so it's like people will get married or whatever. They'll be in a relationship for like 10 years, they'll separate or whatever, right? And I just saw a video from Preston recently. Somebody actually went to the so far saying, um, I think marriage it cannot be more than 10 years. It can be, I don't see how it is possible. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily think of it like that. But even him and some others I've come across, and I see, okay, well, you guys are looking at it in a particular way. You have certain experience. I'm not gonna like I can't. What am I gonna say? Fight about it? There's no point. But recently, Preston,
Of course.
right? So I saw what Preston said shared. I saw a video of him, who we know, this guy Preston Smiles. So he's a coach. His wife is also a coach, and what he shared in the video is um, him and Alexi, his wife, they divorced and they got back together again. And they just did it as a practice of like, hey, we're evolving and and we have a whole new relationship that we're creating. So it was basically like they're breaking apart the previous relationship and immediately they're creating a new relationship, right? So it's like, so this is where the second part ties in, which is as you're evolving, you're gonna have to not only create the environment for yourself, but for the other person. And together, you have to not just evolve yourself, but you have to help the other person evolve and you have to evolve the environment. And I'm going to replace all those have tos with get tos because that right there is something that you get to do to transform yourself and transform the people around you and to be an example of something extraordinary.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
what are I mean, maybe that's not a clear question. Should
It's
I?
okay. I mean, I feel happy to start sharing that. Okay, so you asked about what a man can do to create that environment.
Exactly. But then also as it evolves, right? Like basically the man has to pay attention to be like, what are the needs for her right now and how are they going to be moving forward? But also, what are my needs now and how are they going to be moving forward? And it's not like you can predict the future, but you create the future. You have some sense. It's like, I heard I don't know who it was, but it was somebody from Ramakrishna Mutt, one of the monks from Ramakrishna Mutt. Um, anyways, I'm not going to name any names because I just don't remember which one it was, even though I have some ideas of who it could have been. But the point that this person was making, this monk was making, was look, by the time you're a teenager, you know what you want in your life. And today I'm 28. Fuck, I kid you not. I fucking knew, man. And even in my early 20s, that vision I created in all the areas of my life, today I'm actually going all in on that. Pretty much the same thing, even though I like really evolved and became a very different person than I was at the time. So there's some variation, but at the core, it's the same. It's more of how I'm choosing to relate to it. So I'm coming not from scarcity, but I'm coming from abundance. I'm coming from insecurity, but I'm coming from giving, from wholeness, from completeness, not from seeking approval, control, security. And when I not that it's completely gone, but I see that and I'm like, I don't want to source it from the outside. I want to create that from within, right?
Okay.
And so essentially what I'm saying is the purpose or intention or goal of or vision of my life it hasn't changed like from my teen years. Like it just hasn't, right? So it's interesting, right? So these things are there. There's variations and we evolve, but there's still something at the core that remains the same for this lifetime.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't, maybe that'll change, but at least in my experience today, that's how it is.
Yeah.
But it's like because this is a challenge as evolution is happening, how do we create that environment for ourselves, our partner, in a way that it's going to work? And it's not about predicting it. It's about how do I consciously create it? What is required? What are the tools? What are the elements to consider?
Right.
What the fuck?
It's it's so cool, actually. I mean, it can feel maybe a little overwhelming, but I also think it's really beautiful adventure if that's how you choose to relate to it. Um, and for me, having been in, just to be completely honest, a relationship two relationships actually as an adult that when I really understand, when I really look at from a very conscious, like after that second relationship ended, I was able to really take the space to deep dive again into coaching on a much deeper level into personal development. That's when I started as well working with the Isha Foundation and gaining some different tools. I had already been a meditator for 24 years, but it was just a different level of tools and self-awareness and deep diving. And what I recognized when I looked back at both of those relationships, which I did very deeply because I really wanted to own my stuff and use, like I do with everything, every opportunity to grow deeply. I saw that there were more karmic relationships and I was seeking security and approval really deeply, and
From
because
them?
from them, because that's something I didn't get from my father and from my family of origin. So it was like this deep unconscious seeking, from a young immature place. And the way that I see relationship now is both with myself and then anything that I create with other is that life, it has to be, the foundation must be in, for me, the fact that this is an evolutionary journey. We are here to evolve. We have many, many, many layers of karma. And life is about the process. And there's going to be a ton of cycles. Like everything about it is cyclical. So, when you're young, I mean, I still feel quite young, but I'm probably halfway through my life. But before I was 40, I mean, I never thought about mortality really at all. So I think there's a way that, like, especially when you're young, you're just kind of like living all out. But really, there is a finite thing happening here, and it's cyclical, and you can see the patterns. So even when I was studying masculine, especially the masculine dynamics, there are stages of development of men and women too, but there's stages of development even. So I think that's really important also to be aware of. There's just so many layers to be aware of, but in then creating that relationship with yourself where you understand that you have value intrinsically as a being, you are capable, and like life is really asking you to evolve. And any kind of things that happen in relationships, in life itself, you have like layers of karma, personality, emotional things. The more that you understand, are really self-honest, you deeply reflect. That's why I love coaching as well, because it really allows you, through knowing your dynamics, to create that distance, within, so that whatever practices you're doing sadhana wise have the space then to really transform you. I think if you have that kind of foundation and you create a relationship with someone else with a similar foundation, at least there's shared agreements. I'm a couples coach as well, and we talk about creating relationship vision. And, I think individually your vision is really important. That's something I work with all my clients as a coach. And then you have to have a conscious relationship vision as well. I mean, you don't have to, but it's cool if you do. And when you have that kind of context for your own life, and you give yourself the space to live this way, and then you can really consciously do that within a relationship, I think it's quite beautiful, and it naturally then happens what you're talking about, which is each individual gets honored, and I think as opposed to having it be merely usatory, or simply transactional, or like, because we even exchanged a couple of slides the other day about how every relationship is transactional. You can't really avoid that, but it's how you hold that. It's like, is it respectful? Is it honoring? Is it with integrity? Is it, And so I think that, for me, for example, not feeling seen, held, heard, when you don't feel that from the masculine, you can't receive them fully, because you're not being received, you're not being seen, you aren't safe. So it's like you said earlier, it's like a dance that has to be rooted in mutual honoring, mutual respect. And I think just quite naturally, like for me at least, when I understand the truth that I'm a whole being unto myself and this is my journey, and then the dance I'm doing with someone else is, it has to also deeply honor them as a unique being with a unique karmic trajectory, or maybe evolutionary trajectory is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So I don't
Two
know.
beings evolving and supporting each other in their evolution.
Absolutely. And I think and you asked about creating the safe space for the feminine to flower, blossom, be in her feminine. And I would even say, like, this also includes what you mentioned earlier, which is that every being, even men, have that masculine and feminine within. And really, we're all kind of working to balance those within us. And so it's not just about having the woman feel, creating the space for her to flower and be in her feminine, but it's also creating the space for both partners to be able to be balanced in that way, and for the masculine to be fully received and to have the space to do what he needs to do and have the freedom to choose and all of that. That also, it's like you said, it's reciprocal. It also gets cultivated in the ground of respect, of
So
devotion.
then, for a man watching this with more traditional ideas like myself, what I would think is create that within first, right? Create that masculine feminine dynamic within.
Mm,
See,
mm,
learn how to nurture the feminine within and
mm.
how to enhance the masculine, and how does that work within, let's say for me, how does that work within myself or my own life? How do I
Well,
experience all of this, and how do I engage with the world and my interactions in this way? And
mm,
then once you have it within you, you experience it all, then you can expand it. You can expand the capacity to include another person. And then because you know by experience, you can do it for her. And then you can contribute in that way, and then you can lead the way for her. Right.
I think
And then no matter, and then there's needs, and based on the stages of evolution of the man and the woman over the period of life, and also other evolutionary needs based on whatever else is required for the person's inner genius to flower.
truth. Yeah, and I another way to say masculine and feminine is like go and flow.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
And when you talk about like cultivating the feminine within you, and then we tie it back to our first conversation where we were talking about how as a founder, or as like someone in trying to make big beautiful things happen in the tech world or whatever it is, um, how to do that without compromising your health. And to me, this all connects because we're talking about go and flow. So flow is feminine, go is masculine. And I could give you like a ton more, definitions, but if you think about it, within each day, really, if we're looking at balance, cultivating the whole system, cultivating an environment where your genius can flower, within each day, you need that cyclical go and flow. That's where we come and we go into internally and we meditate and do our yoga. Then we come out and we like do our work, act, act, act. Then we need to like go in, flow, eat, whatever. Same thing. It's like a whole cyclical thing.
It's interesting you see it that way because I also feel both exist in the moment simultaneously. And in
Oh,
my experience, that's how it happens. Whether it's me engaging with somebody in a conversation or pushing things along, quote
yeah.
unquote, pushing, the way I say it like that. But there is a sense for me of surrendering and holding myself, and at the same time, stepping up and doing something. It's as if both are happening in this moment together and they're not any different. So when, it's
Yes.
different from the perspective you said. It's like you take time to do A and you take time to do B. But what I'm finding myself experiencing is, wait a minute, A and B are happening at the same time for me right now. It's as if there's A and then B is there just resting on A, and they're both like happening within. And it's not even like B is resting on A, it's like it's inside of it but on top of it, and both are like all around it. And it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but as if both there's a vector space in which both dimensions exist simultaneously. I
Completely
don't know
agree
why
with
I'm getting into math, but
I love it so much because I totally agree with that. Like that is
okay.
also, and even what you said about this is kind of like potentially, I don't know, but even what you said about all around and receiving and all of this stuff, to me, it's like if we think about everything in existence being like mirror images or like refractory images, even what you said about that masculine feminine dynamic within yourself at all times, it mirrors like the physical merging as well that masculine and feminine do. But
Creator and creation.
it's so beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I totally agree with you. I really do feel that same way, that both yeah, both energies are there all the time. And um and I think, back to your question of like how does the masculine create this space for the feminine to be seen and held and safe? I mean, I think it's all this. I really do. Like the foundation of it. And if we talk about like how you make yourself inside and your own inner dynamics are what manifests in your physical reality.
That's interesting you say that. So just to sum it up, what Naomi's saying is create the dynamic within yourself of a healthy masculine, feminine. And maybe this is not the healthy that you want. That's totally fine. Maybe you have really different views for the people that are watching. But if this is the type of dynamic that you want, we'll consider it a healthy dynamic. There might be others, I don't know. But if you want this one, then the approach is to create that within yourself, to become that which you wish to manifest. I mean, you don't have to talk about this. Like manifestation is all about that. You create what is within you.
Mm.
If you're not happy with what's outside of you, then change yourself, and then you will naturally change what's around you. You'll take different actions, and that's going to result in different uh, whatever's different outside of you that you want to make, right? But you got to change something within you to,
More than actions. It's more than actions though, right? It's energetics, it's
which is
frequency.
also action. It's action on all levels. I don't mean physical action. When I
Yeah.
say you take different action, I mean on all levels. Different
Yeah.
action with your level, with your body, different action on the level of your mind, different action on the level of your energy, different action level, different action on the level of your emotions. So I don't mean action as in, and I
Yes.
took this item and I put it there. I also mean action on the level of how are you carrying yourself, right? Like, how am I carrying myself? What kind of thoughts am I having? What am I feeding within myself? What am I starving within myself, right? So these types of things, so that I
But
can
then
bring.
that's really about your fragrance. You know how
Mhm.
Sadhguru talks about the fragrance and the vasanas?
Mm-hmm. That
See
that
that
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. The vasanas are the fragrance. Yep, exactly. Your vasana. I think that's cool because I thought of that too. I used to think about this a long time ago, back when I read about Gautam Buddha, because he talked about how your life is just a consequence of your vasanas, and your vasanas are your fragrance. And
Mm,
so you just change your fragrance, but you cannot change them to a certain degree, or you can only change them to a certain degree. There's a certain core that
yeah,
is very difficult to change. And some people can, but it's like, is it even worth investing your entire life to change it? Huh?
because I don't know about that.
I know you
It
can. There's, yeah, there's something with Sadhguru. It was, he didn't say this, but essentially it was that it requires tremendous willpower to go outside of
makes
whatever
sense.
that path is. And he said most people don't have that tremendous willpower, and so you might as well just do that. And that's what I learned. I learned by experience, right? I tried I considered different paths for myself, and I was like, I'm gonna try this, and I'm like, I can't do this,
Mm,
right? It's not even about, oh, this is better or this is worse. It's like, it's not me. So it's, what's interesting for me is now I don't even look at a lot of things as bad. People tell me their life and what they've done, and I don't look at it. I think, no, I never think like, oh man, this guy's so bad. Why is he doing this? I'm not like judging him, I'm just, okay, cool. That's like, that's just his thing, whatever. But I can't judge anyone because even I'm stupid. Like I see it,
I'm
right?
definitely stupid. That's for sure.
Huh? What?
Oh my God. I said I'm definitely stupid. That's for sure. I mean, I would say, there's a silent meditation retreat that happens in the Isha Foundation called Samyama, right? And
We've both done that.
we have, yeah. And I did Samyama sadhana last year, and I will say that, oh my God. I mean, the experience of like I'm just trying to think of the best way to say it, of my ridiculous BS. It's like, oh man, that's some humbling shit. It really is. It really is. So I think we're all, you know, we're all quite ridiculous to a degree, and we all also have a lot of great qualities and all of that. But I love what Sadhguru says, which is like the less of a personality you are, the more of a presence you'll be. Like that's really beautiful to me. Um, and I mean, it to me, it also relates to what we're talking about, because even like that mask quote you gave at the beginning, right? It's like whatever karmas we came in with, which is like personality, psychology, emotions, um, samskara, which is, in a way like our wounding, or the perspective that we're kind of.
I'll just talk a little about what samskara means. It's
Okay.
the grooves in your mind. Or no, let me reframe. It's the grooves in your brain.
Yeah, it's I think mind is a good, I mean, in
Well,
any,
because
it's impressions.
it is the impressions in your mind which translate to the grooves in your brain. So every single moment as you age, whatever you've come across leaves an impression on you. Whatever actions you take leaves an impression on you, and that gathers on the mind, and
Right.
that can be seen on your brain's grooves. That part I heard from again, I heard that from a monk, from Ramakrishna Mutt, but that continues on, and so we cannot go back. There is a way to like clean up, right? That's what Kriya Yoga allows us to do, but
Yes.
it's not like gonna disappear completely. It lessens its effects, and that's also, you have different forms of yoga. You have bhakti yoga as well. It's really helpful. But like I said, there's a certain path for you, but all the paths lead to what? That singularity, that oneness. But it's important that you go on your own path. And so what's required here is to recognize what that is, to see that, and leverage your samskaras for the benefit of yourself and the benefit of all life around you. That's what it
Right.
is for me, right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's not what it is for you. Maybe you want destruction of for everyone. I don't know. Maybe you're like, I don't know. Well, who are these criminals? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, I guess my point though is that, when we talk about masks, generally we're talking about, this is a great generalization, okay, but if you want to talk about, I think it's a combination usually of social and cultural programming of like what's ideal or what's, you know, popular, or what's successful, or what's desirable. And also obviously family conditioning comes into that. So family, social, cultural programming slash, you know, ideals. And then also sometimes shame can get in there around, you know, and again, to me, shame is a misunderstanding uh, that of the nature of life itself, the nature of karma itself, and a mistake that somehow got either um, told to you, spoken or unspoken, by whoever you are around, that like something about you or something that you've done is not okay. You know, it's not acceptable. Inherently, shame means like you are bad or wrong. And so I think, at least for me, for example, in my childhood, like it was a combination
Just I would add, there's shame and there's guilt. Shame is I am wrong. Guilt is I have done something wrong. Shame is based on identity. Guilt is based on action. So as you go and you're going to share about your childhood, as you go, for the listeners here, keep that in mind.
Yeah. So guilt, the value of guilt, right, is that it can show you where you maybe have taken some actions not in alignment with your integrity or your, you know, moral compass, if you want to call it that. I think there's value, there's some value. You can use guilt to grow. Shame is this kind of, it's not really productive from what I can see, other than, again, showing you where you're not connected to the truth of life and of your being.
And another way to reframe is like I don't think of it as like, oh, I did something wrong or I am wrong. When I see that coming up within myself, I don't even try to use guilt. I don't, it's like, okay, shame, if it comes, recognize it and try use it to understand the nature of things and to dissolve what is untrue, to dissolve that identity. And then when I see guilt, the idea here is, oh, okay, well, if I feel like I did something wrong, then how would I have known in that given moment that this was the right thing to do? If so, what is it relative to? Some sense of what? Moral compass. So putting aside all morals, putting aside all ethics, and just saying within me, was I experiencing myself showing up for all life? Yes or no? Right? And so if I look at guilt in that way, the question is, okay, I did it to the best of my abilities. The action or the choice that was made, there was a more appropriate action that could have been done, a more appropriate choice that could have been made, but I did not know. I did it to the best of my ability. So today I can look at it and say, cool, what did I learn? Now I can just tune myself to be closer and closer to integrity. So rather than looking at it as a mechanism to feel good or feel bad, reframe it so it becomes a mechanism for growth. So I like what you said, but I would actually reframe it to make it even more practical, which is this useful? Is this not useful?
Yeah.
Look at it for its usefulness. Now, at this point, you're going to think I'm so highly utilitarian, but it is important to recognize that we have this body and this mind, which are tools.
No, I mean, it's not about utilitarian. It's about it's about navigating our experience for growth and evolution, like for what it's actually there for, you know? So I love that. I love that because I didn't go deep on it. So you did. I love that. Thank you so much. But yeah, so I would say that, you know, again, to tie this back to what I was saying earlier, which is that when you understand your dynamics, your impressions, you know, some level of awareness around your samskaras, and then look at, you know, your shame or not, your social, cultural, family programming, when you really understand all of that to a degree, it really helps you to navigate your life and also really deeply respect yourself, and that creates the feeling of being seen, being held, and feeling heard, and not being a victim, right? So those are all needs of the feminine. Um,
It's beautiful you share that because this just reflects to me that if you want to create an environment to make a woman feel that way, you can first create an environment within you to make
yes,
yourself feel that way. Do you see yourself? Do you hear yourself? Are you feeling safe within yourself? Or
yes.
are you constantly berating yourself? What is your self-talk like? Are you putting yourself down? A lot of this are some scaras that you would have inherited. So the question is, how do we break apart what's not necessary and recreate it something, nurture that which is useful? Because if
I
you
don't,
do that, you will do that for the people around you as well. You'll make others around you feel seen, safe, understood, heard, because you are able to do that for yourself and you know how to show up in a way that you can do it. Not just for yourself, but you can do it for others. And you will naturally do that for everybody around you. And that is a gift to humanity. At least that's how I try to approach life.
definitely true. It's definitely true. That's my experience. And also for me, so say like as a feminine being, for example, when we talk about relationship, it's like what I long for in a masculine partner is to be like fully seen and to be able to be fully myself and not be shut down, not be you know asked not not express. It's not that I want to just like express endlessly, but the point being like, and not only that, but to be respected for who I am, to be valued for that level of self-awareness, and also being in touch with the ground of my own being, which then inherently, like, I've cultivated my intuition, my awareness, my intelligence, my level of ability to communicate, and all of those things. So not only do I not want that to be a threat, but I also want that to be valued because it is valuable to that person, right? Um, but the point is too that when I have felt that little girl part of me, or the whatever parts of me that really wants to be seen, and I can recognize that like that longing originates in my experience with my dad, with masculine, that I wasn't seen and it wasn't safe and I got shamed and all these things for it. But also I then can show up for myself on my masculine side by like creating a certain level of stability and a solid container and all of these things, and even seeing myself, which are also masculine qualities. It's very interesting. um I don't know if that was helpful at all, but I feel like it's really important to whatever degree we can really give ourselves what we're looking for from another person.
Absolutely. Actually, I do make sense to me, and I'm sure for everybody else watching, listening, it's the same thing because, or maybe not for everybody, I don't know. But for me, it is, which is meeting my own needs
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
myself from within. And it, it is like this weird, I don't know if it's like a weird kaleidoscope, but it's as if and when I sit here, everything is here all at once, and at the same time, there's nothing. And so when I experience everything right here, it's an opportunity for me to look at it from all the different approaches, angles, whatever, um, and see, okay, well, why do I want? This is something that I got into very quickly once I started getting into meditative practice, and it was, well, why do I want what I want? Why do I want what I want? How do I know that what I want is what I want?
Yeah.
Right.
Love.
And that was like me, what, I don't know how, whatever I was, like 20 years old or something, 21, so whatever, 22. I'm not sure. I was a fucking kid back then. Still am. But, and that's what got into me into Kriya Yoga, because sitting there and then a lot of this stuff was coming up. And these are two core questions I had. Right. So if whatever we're looking for outside of us, the real question is, can I give that within myself first? Totally, 100%. If I give that to myself totally, then naturally I will manifest that outside of me in a
And,
way that is healthy for this piece of life. But it's not easy to do. I kid you not. Um,
and that other piece of life, because if you are only in extraction mode, like you are needing that person to give that to you, that's a never ending well, first of all. If it doesn't, now another teacher of mine used to say that the heart has to become full from the inside. It has to blossom out. The lotus has to blossom out, the lotus of the heart chakra, and it has to become full from the inside. You can never put enough in from out to make it full. And so it connects to me to what Sadhguru mentioned as well, which is like, when you can fill your own needs in this way, when you can really deeply hear yourself and be with yourself and, explore these things and become that whole complete piece of life unto yourself, then relationships can be about amplifying joy and like enjoying life together. And also, yes, of course, there is some level of transaction because maybe human beings need support and they need to like have community and to share certain things. It's supportive and helpful. But still, it's not what I've noticed in my life over and over and over again is if I'm depending on someone else to fill a certain need, it really impacts my ability to see them clearly and to feel fully what is happening for them, because it's a little bit conditional, and
mm,
it's a little bit more about like the security of my needs being met as opposed to just being able to like, I'm okay, I'm here, I'm rooted in the self, I'm complete, and now let me, yeah, share with you, but also genuinely be able to feel what's happening for you, where you are.
yeah, it
uh,
sounds like you're talking about standing on your own within yourself, because you mentioned you're rooted within yourself now, right? There's that difference.
but also that's a really beautiful way to be able to give the masculine the freedom and the space, to do what they need to do and to choose. And
Otherwise, the man will feel, I'm going to say the man specifically, is going to feel clinginess and jealousy coming from
yeah,
from
yeah,
her.
absolutely. Clinginess is a good word. Neediness, um, also like, I mean, essentially it's like for women, this is a very interesting thing, but I don't know if you've studied Alison Armstrong's work at all, but she's talked a lot about masculine, feminine, particularly men. She's studied men a lot. She wrote the books about, stages of development of men and all these things. But one of the things that she talks about is like women need to one of the things that men do for us is they provide and protect, right? Which you've mentioned before as well. But when we are not honoring them, when we don't give them the space they need, when we don't give them the freedom they need, when we are not just receiving them, we become needy, we become like our needs aren't being met, our, whatever, then we can also start to emasculate men very easily, because that's something that we have been super modeled, like modeled for generations.
Well, that's what's happening to men in the West.
Oh my God. I don't think it's just the West, though. I will tell you what, I know enough people in India and all over the world to say that the emasculation of men has been happening for a long, long, long time. And it's like it's the same feedback loop. I mean, the sort of dance that can happen when there's healthy masculine and healthy feminine, how it feeds into each other and blossoms into something much greater as a whole. Like this very similar thing where it's like a woman doesn't feel heard, she doesn't feel safe, she doesn't feel held, she doesn't feel all these things, and then she emasculates men, and then that is like that's us feeling like abandoned, not loved, not seen, and then men experience that as an attack. They also definitely are not being received. And then it kind of, these are like primal survival level, dynamics, but then they kind of go into like, there's a lot of physiological things they talk about with men that happen when they're under attack, because again, they're warrior modes. They really can't tap in then to their creative mode as well. They're more in survival in their own way.
So
And
right now, Avin is in Japan, and he went for an AI conference. Avin is my co-founder. He's my friend. Also, he basically he went to a conference in Japan. He was telling me, he's like, dude, I don't know why everybody loves Japan so much. I have more fun in like Vietnam and Thailand. Everybody here is so different. This culture is so particular. It's weird to me. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then he told me, he said, did you know, dude, 67% of people, I don't know what the exact number was. It was above 60%. And I think, but I don't know if I'm mixing up the 67 with another percent that somebody else told me recently. But I think that he said this. And this was this morning, he was just telling me. 67% of people in Japan don't have sex. Do you know that, bro? And I'm like, well, I know. I mean, I don't know that, but I know that they have a birth rate crisis, which is a different thing. But that's interesting, right? And he was like, yeah, the girls are so shy here too. And I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. So he's just telling me how he's going and he's seeing this very different culture. And one thing that's coming up from what you're saying is like, as all the cultures are evolving, one thing that I notice is like, even in our culture, like my culture,
okay.
India, right? It's like, oh, you're in university. Great. Do you have a girlfriend? Are you gonna get married like when you graduate, or you get married now, whatever, right? And it's like there is no even in previous generation I've seen this, okay? There is only earn money and get married. It's not develop yourself into a man. Like be a fucking man. Like what does it mean to be a man? Being a
So
man, like that shit is not there.
I don't know. I will say, and okay, so then the stages of development of a woman or of a female are like more into, the like final stages being queen, a real woman, like a actual fully developed woman. These things, fully developed man, fully developed woman, very extremely, extraordinarily rare.
So this guy, I don't know if he's like this divorce lawyer. I can't James
I think
Paxton something. You've probably seen him. Something I can't remember the name, but he did an interview and that interview blew up and he's doing interviews a bunch of times and he's like a celebrity lawyer. He gave a few cases of how people, he like $100 million worth divorces, billions of dollars of divorce, like for one divorce, right? Not he's not making it, but that's like how much like settlements and stuff like this,
Right.
right? This is all in the
Yeah.
States. And he said that he's he gave very clear examples. He's like, yeah, people come and always recommend a prenup. He says when a couple starts fighting for their prenup, I know that they're screwed. I know that they're gonna come. I know they will be back here again. That's what he said. And he said, but if I talk to them about a prenup and they just do it and they leave, he's like, I know I'm never gonna see them again because they're just gonna have a healthy relationship, right?
Mm.
And one thing that I remember, I watched this 50-minute interview or whatever it was, an hour, like 50 to 60 minutes. But this is really the last 3 minutes that was the most astounding. He said, I don't remember the exact story in detail, but he was with his wife and two kids and another couple and their two kids. So they were out somewhere at some amusement park. And then so they're like, hey, we'll watch the kids as they go on this ride. So then the other couple could go off, or maybe it was him and his wife that could go off. But they were so excited. And like the way that he saw them, he was like, this is literally the only couple that he met that he felt, they're really great and the way they feel about each other. And he was telling the guy, he's like, "Oh, I never felt this way about my wife before, right?" And what was interesting to me is what he said. He said, "Ah, so it was just like two whole people that did the work on themselves and came together, right?" So if you anybody, I mean, long story short, if you're gonna skip like or bluff, right? Like bottom line up front for this conversation, it's this: work on yourself and then wait,
Mm.
right? Right?
That's
So
true. Make yourself beautiful and then see what comes into your space.
yeah. And the reason that feels really hard is because there's so much pressure from the people around you to go to do something totally different. And I feel that. I feel people are pulling me in directions that I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And if I step forward in any of those directions, which I have, I immediately am like, fuck this. And then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, now I'm deprived, but it's like, anyways, I was deprived. It doesn't matter. So then the question is, well, what am I depriving myself of? Well, I'm not deprived. I'm a whole complete piece of life. Why do I need? So then what do? You deprioritize. When you deprioritize, you divest from what is not important. And you begin to have energy to prioritize what matters and energy to invest into those priorities. And it can be very difficult, man. Like it's so hard. But it's not hard because I'm doing a hard thing for the sake of it. You're choosing to do what is worthwhile. You're choosing to do what you care for, you truly care for. You're choosing to do what matters for you. So if you want to evolve as a human being to the highest, which is probably why you're watching this, otherwise you would have quit. You wouldn't even be here. You literally would not have watched up until this point. If that's you, then shit, how do you cultivate that healthy dynamic within yourself? Because it's about the masculine feminine energy, which is a reflection. Those attributes of energy are a reflection of the attributes of energy that are in existence itself. And when you do that, I can't say this for certain, and I have no objective way of saying this scientifically, but I can tell you this from my own experience that this right here is going to create a certain alignment with the earth, the moon, the sun, and the entire cosmos,
Mm.
right? The whole pottery wheel of this solar system.
Yes.
But anyways, there's no scientific basis for me to say this, or rather, I do not have access to the scientific basis to communicate it with you. But it is a subjective reality for me in my experience.
Mm.
Not all of it, but some of it. There's a glimpse.
Mhm. Me too. Me
I
too.
don't know what I just said, but it just came.
Well, there's a line in one of the songs or one of the pieces in Internal Echoes, which is a really beautiful album, by the way, if you haven't listened to it.
I have not.
Oh my God.
You're like, dude.
You have
Okay,
to listen to it. It's so profound. Oh my God. And
it is
listen to it.
profound. I've heard some, but I've like read some.
Incredible.
But I should
Incredible.
probably. Oh, you know what? I'll just walk into a forest and start listening to it. How long is it?
It's maybe, I'm not sure, maybe like 50 minutes or something.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, I can do that. I'll just walk into a forest next time I do that. Yeah.
So good.
Or I'll listen to it next time I walk into a forest, which is like probably tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah, but he talks about that in one of the pieces, which is like, if you are in alignment with nature or existence itself, like everything will happen for you. And I'm not saying it well, I'm not looking at the lyric right now, but it's so true. I mean, this is all just about aligning yourself with the flow of nature so that your life becomes really graceful and easeful and beautiful. And yeah, some really beautiful stuff here. And when I coach my individual clients who are in a relationship or not, but especially those ones, and my couples, it's like I really support them to cultivate this relationship with their relationship, both with themselves and definitely with their partnership, that is rooted in deep respect for themselves as a whole person and the other as a whole person, and coming together and having like that little interwoven entity of us, and really holding like all disharmony or conflict or um you know uh friction basically as an evolutionary opportunity, and as really for what it is, which is just something on the surface that is pointing into directions of growth and lack of alignment and evolution basically, and deeper awareness, but it's always held within a deep respect for, even with my last partner who I split with, I remember, so he had an affair when I was in India, which was intense, let's just say it that way. When I got back, I was like, oh my God, like my life just completely broke open and shifted everything. And I'm really grateful in that moment that I had all the tools that I do, but also that I had that opportunity. It was such a gift. It was such an incredibly beautiful gift. I'm so grateful, which sounds insane, but it really allowed me to see and face so many things that I would have never they would have never been revealed to me. And also it allowed me to go through a process because we co-owned a business together as well as had a life. We lived together. All of our stuff was intertwined. The situation allowed me to not just walk away, but to have to like conduct myself well, gracefully, respectfully, in a way that honored me and honored him. And I remember just like sometimes when it would be like so intense, just like keep coming back to the fact that like no matter what has happened or is happening, this is a soul that we have had this karma together. We have danced this together. We have been supporting each other in whatever way we could. And how I want to dissolve it and go about our separate ways also needs to be totally honoring and full of integrity and respect. And yeah, I just think that's worth saying because ultimately you need to treat yourself that way, and you absolutely need to be that way in your relationships, no matter what, respect and integrity. I mean, and that can look a lot of different ways. I mean, sometimes respect and integrity means like they're not in your life whatsoever and they have no access to you, but just depends on the situation. But I think within the way you hold it has to be that way. Even if that was the choice where like if that person or whatever people are so disrespectful and so unable to conduct themselves in a way that doesn't make you feel safe, seen, held, anything, or is potentially dangerous, even that can be respectful of like completely shutting that door and creating a lot of boundaries. That can also be done with respect and honoring of who they are, and because again, that's just someone being lost to responses, reactions, pain, acting out. It's not really who they are and fully. So yeah, I don't know if that was too much, but I just somehow felt that come out.
No, I find that really true. So it's about how you carry that respect within yourself, that integrity within yourself, and that on the level of the social transaction, or yeah, on the level of the social transaction, you conduct it appropriately, right? But you cannot, it's difficult for somebody to look at it, how the transaction is happening and ascertain the level of respect that's there. They might think this is being disrespectful, but they have no fucking clue
Right.
what led to that transaction being, what led to the nature of that transaction, whether it's completely ignoring or allowing the nonsense to go on. You don't know what's behind it, right? So
Yeah.
until you lift the curtain, you actually don't know. But when you lift the curtain, you need to see what that sense of respect and self-respect and integrity is, right? So one thing this comes back for me is like, you have such an experience, but for me it's when you talk about like the masculine, the feminine, and the emasculation of the masculine, and like my friend's experience going to Japan and like finding out about like how this is how people are living, and he's like, what the hell, this is like so strange. He's like, this is how people are living, like it's crazy that the no wonder society, like, it's just, I don't know if Japan's the only country, but maybe it's South Korea too, where some of these countries are giving out visas to people who will go and who will marry and produce children with someone, and who's in the country, right? Like, I've seen this. I just seen it on like Instagram floating around. So I was like, oh, interesting.
Very reliable source.
Yeah, no, but it is like, because you go and
I know.
you
I'm
actually,
just being silly. Yeah.
but that's how we get our news.
Oh my
um
God.
but the main thing here for me is like, if you can really tune into your masculine and your feminine, then you can actually pay attention to how they're being treated in different interactions. And when you see that, then you can actually feel that, yo, what the fuck? This thing is being emasculated. Now, if you can also feel it, you can turn up or turn down the dial as necessary in a given moment to make sure that you are being healthy about it. And also, you have to be, like you said, that self-respect and integrity. So you got to stand there and say, look, this is what it is, and this is how, like, this is what's required. And you just stand for what's true.
Yeah.
You have to be able to stand for what's true. If you don't stand for what's true, what's the point? Like, why even exist?
The way you do that is by knowing yourself, really deep diving into what's true and having no hidden places and no lying. So to yourself. So the more,
Mm,
like, that's what keeps you in integrity, and that's how you know you can come from what's true. And I think any interactions or situations that are that's what relationship does. It's a mirror for you to see where you're lying to yourself, or where you maybe have like a hidden pocket of this or that. I mean, that's some good stuff. And I want to go back really quick before we end. I remember now where I was trying to go, which was to take things back to that quote about masks, like true love being about the person that you can take the mask off with. What does it say? I'm going to read it one more time really quick. Which is, um, love is when you can take off the masks you feared you couldn't live without and knew you couldn't live within. So what I was saying about family, cultural, social norms, and also impressions and samskara, and basically, and shame and all of those things, was around like masks people wear, um, and that's just an adaptive strategy. Usually it's a survival strategy, usually. Um, but I think just to know these aspects of yourself allows you and to be truly deeply self-honest, which again I was fully able to do because of that holding of the ground of being that like you're a human being, karma is there, you know, everybody has stuff they're dealing with. This is not about you being a terrible person or whatever, but like to be able to really look and be completely honest about you just the gunk of what it is to be human, whatever that is for me. And that has allowed me to, by cultivating my relationship with that ground of being, it's allowed me to take off all of my masks, all the masks that I would wear, right? And so now
Within yourself.
within myself and without. So now instead of wearing masks in interactions, in social interactions, in the world interactions, I more, all the rules are my rules. So I more like function through certain social rules, quote unquote, based on what's appropriate for the situation versus wearing a mask. And now also when you say, you know, for me, what this quote brought up for me, because he said like that there's a simple sign that you found true love. And I even have friends now and have experienced relationships many times, but in a much deeper way than ever before, where I'm fully myself. Like I fully show myself very vulnerably and in a very real and deep way. And because I've done that within myself, I can now do that in relationship, and it's incredibly deeply fulfilling and nourishing and supportive and it really feels quite amazing. And for me, it's created the situations where I can truly share like deep joy and the profound wonder that life is with other people. So,
Yeah, that's very beautiful.
yeah, it is. It's an adventure, like I said in the beginning. It's
Mhm.
so thrilling. Like I love it. It's so awesome and fun. It's not always fun, but it's mostly fun. Yeah. What's coming up for you here at the end?
I mean a bunch of things, but I just remembered this thing, we brought up, I mentioned about taking the masculine and feminine dynamics and noticing how, because as I look and it's just coming out for me how in certain interactions how I would have experienced the whole thing and how I would have been put down or I was put down and in unnecessary ways, right? And so
Mm,
it's more of taking charge of how I show up to show up and stand for what's needed, right? Of like this is how the interaction should be. This is the nature of the transaction that's required in order to move things forward, and that's it.
mm,
And as I've done this, I've transformed the nature of my relationship with mom.
nice.
And it's in the sense of me stepping up more and appreciating her feminine, right?
Nice.
And recognizing that, okay, there's a lot of, because I live with my parents, right? And so there's a lot of like, okay, how do I mm, consciously ensure, because I've already been doing it, but now it's like, okay, well, if how do I take whatever I do for her that she wants me to do? How do I take that and how do I increase that? And how, in terms of number of things, how do I increase that in terms of quality? Right. So it's more of, can I actually stand here and recognize this being and what her needs are in all the different ways and see if there's a way that I can serve her better?
Mm,
And I just do that. And it's like I'm receiving so much more.
yes, because
Right.
I love that so much because what I think I was going to ask you earlier what you, because you mentioned like you've been emasculated or whatever so many times, and
Like in the sense of like people will say shit, girls especially will say shit unnecessarily. And I don't think they recognize it, or maybe they don't realize it, but they do it to a lot of people, and I just see it, and I've seen it happening all around and to me, and I'm just like, dude, like what? This is weird and
So what I'm
unnecessary.
saying
It's
is,
different from a shit test. There's a shit test, and then there's
yeah,
this, which is
like
like,
it's just basically that's what I was saying earlier. And this is something that I really believe women need to heal within the collective and themselves. Because, like I said, we, okay, this is another deep conversation, which I don't really think we have full time to give justice to, but this is very deep within the collective feminine from like millennia, right? If you look at the history of the females, witches burning at the stake, like women not being safe physically for so long, for many, 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 like now is the time in the history of the world where women are the most safe in most areas of the world, right? So we have this kind of like, in a way, it's a deep wounding from many millennia of kind of being under threat to some degree. To some degree. Now, again, this is a gross generalization, so please forgive me. But there is a level of accumulated resentment that I have seen in the collective feminine. And that has created a situation where it's like polarization, where then the women have been like, they haven't felt safe, they haven't felt held, they haven't felt seen, they haven't felt heard, they felt threatened. And so they haven't received the masculine, they've emasculated them, which is criticizing, complaining, comparing, never being satisfied, like withholding admiration, accountability, appreciation, attention. It's like just all the things that we do to cut men down. And it's sick. It's a sick behavior that's really unhealthy and really disrespectful. But again, you have to look at the root of it. And most of those girls you're talking about, even your mom, I would venture to say, like, a lot of that has been handed down. My mom did that shit all the time. It was like accumulated resentment from her childhood and then what she was manifesting in her relationship. And it's something I had to really consciously like even understand in order to like not play out myself.
yeah,
So,
and go on. I have some very specific thing to look at. I think that's going to be super helpful for everyone. Then
but
this,
the more that you can really be with the feminine, I mean, so number one, I think to just again recognize where other people are coming from. It's not really about you necessarily.
exactly.
It's more about like this accumulated shit, or like there's a million things you could say, but it's basically their stuff or them some scars or their cultural programming or wherever they are coming from. Um, and the more that you have that space and you're not reactive in your system, and that again comes from bringing it in, getting to know your triggers, getting to know your things, getting to know your needs, pain, and hurt, right? Because why would that trigger you? It's because you really want to be received by the feminine. You really want to be like admired, appreciated, like given this space and respect.
Mhm.
So again, this is like why we each need to take it back upon ourselves to really deal with our shit and
But
become a
I would reframe. Those are
okay.
all needs that the human is going to want, the man is going to want. So instead, what I would see is, how do I give that to how do I give it to that part of myself, the part of myself that wants the admiration, the part of that myself that wants whatever it is, right? If I feel it, I'm like, okay, I want to nurture it. I want to give that to myself because now I'm not seeking it from the outside. If it comes, it's actually it's like a multiplication if I receive it. And if I doesn't come, then it's okay because I create it within myself for myself, uh, and within in that part of myself that wants it, right?
And
Because
also
that's not
what I was saying earlier, which is that I think so much of the work we do in coaching, and even if people do Isha, BSP, or whatever, is to
Hmm.
be able to peel off some of the, like to basically process and to release the accumulated hurt, pain, anger, reactive, built up emotion within the system itself, so that we aren't uh, reacting and responding to whatever's coming towards us in a way of being hurt by life. Because what you're saying is absolutely true, which is that we can take that step back and go, wow, I'm going to give this to myself. But also we have to be at a place where we're not just like a bomb going off, where that like button is touched and we explode. I think a
And
lot
that,
of people.
yeah, it actually, one way I find that helpful is like when it comes, you feel it, and when it's not there, try to like actually visualize and feel it and let it come up right by yourself, and then turn it up, like magnify that shit by multiples, 10x, 20x, 100x, and feel it fully, and just see like it's that much, and then to carry it, bring it all forward into a, let's say, a ball with a particular color and a texture. Hold it in that part of your body where it's the highest, and then exhale, let it out. And then once you're fully empty, once the tank is empty, now you fill it up with something that you actually want.
Nice.
And do this as you need to. And every time that it comes up from an external trigger, you feel it, you're like, oh, okay, so then you do this exercise again. And every time it comes up, you do it again up until the point where it stops coming up. And it may still keep coming up, and that's totally fine, but at least it'll lessen, and it'll be less to a degree where it's not a bomb. And once it's not a bomb, then you're good to go. But if it comes up into a bomb, then you can go and lessen it. The question I had for you though, Naomi, was this, right? For anybody that's there, like say, let's just say for me, for example, I'm here, I'm chilling, girl comes up, and boom, it's like not even there's a shit test, but then there's a fucking that thing, right? That bomb goes off. And I'm like, because the shit test, for the people that don't know, a shit test is an autonomous response from a woman in order to test a man's, I was going to say manliness, but let's say to test a man's ability,
Hmm.
right? Uh, so if you're on a date, a woman will give you shit tests all the time, and she's gonna give you shit tests in a variety of different ways, right? But you just got to stand your masculine and take care of them. There's like 4 or 5 different ways to deal with shit tests. We're not gonna get into this. I'm not. This is not my job. But that's what shit tests are. I mean, it could be my job, but I'm not gonna do it right now. That's not the point. But there's shit tests, and there's this, which is so shit tests are not coming from wounding. Shit tests are coming from the woman's ability, from the woman assessing whether this is a man that she can rely on, depend on in a
Right.
given moment. Exactly. Is this so? That's not a bad thing inherently, right? And so they don't have shit tests don't need to give a bad rep. But then there's like the trigger coming from the wounding, which has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with her requiring safety, but it has to do with that wounding that may have been passed down generation to generation. So the question for me is when that comes up and I look at it, it's like, holy shit, I'm going to use myself as an example. So simple. I'm sitting there, I'm just having tea. Some girl comes up, flips out, and I'm like, damn, what the hell? I'm just enjoying my nice bubble tea here. I'm going to put it down. And I'm going to look, I'm going to assess. I'm going to assess, is she freaking out? Okay, it's like options, right? It's like a game. It's like she could be freaking out. She's freaking out maybe because I did something stupid, or she's freaking out maybe because something happened and she's complaining, or she's freaking out because she's getting a shit test, or she's freaking out because her wounding deep within got triggered and now she is coming at me. It's an autonomous response from her to protect herself, kind of like a stray cat. It's like, or kind of like, mm, I mean, I think that's actually like a pretty good example. I'm trying to think of another example, but essentially, it's like her entire existence is at stake, you know? So let's say I recognize first question, first thing, what do I do? First is I want to explore if that's the case, right? First, is this a deep wound? Second, if it is a deep wound, how do I proceed? Like, what the fuck do I do? Do I be like, okay, I'm gonna let her know that she should calm down, not tell her to calm down, because that never works. You don't tell someone to calm down, right? So the second thing is first is recognize, is it that or not? First, okay, let's say it is that. If it is that, then it's now how do I ease her? And third, once I ease her, how do I bring her on board? And then fourth, which could be similar to tied into the third one, is how do I create a space for her to see that and then to help her resolve it and to nurture her so that that wound can be taken care of. Because remember, hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. So this is just the question, the process that I see. But my question is, what are the actual steps? Maybe it's those 4 steps, maybe it's not, right? But step 1 is you need to recognize it. Step 2 is you need to cognize it. Step 3 is you create a space to actually open up the it's like, there's a bunch of hot water, you want to open it up and you want to let the steam out, right? So first you let the steam out and then you let it cool down. And once it's cooled down, then you can have the water once it's cooled down to a certain temperature. Let's do that for her so that now we can help her heal that.
Right.
So how do we go about it, Naomi? Maybe that's a big question, but I feel this would be so helpful. I know it'd be helpful for me. Must be helpful for you, or not for you, but whoever's watching. And by the way, guys, if this is actually helpful, man, like drop a fire, bro.
Well, I do think it's a very big conversation, but if you think back to that core need to feel seen, held, not victimized, and be heard, and that there's not a threat or danger. So basically, if I'm just going to boil it down really quick, it's that she really, at that point, on a primal level, feels your potential ability as a masculine man to be able to contain or hold or see her, whatever it is. So generally, like the way women work is that what Alison Armstrong calls it is they need to empty their basket, which is like venting. They just kind of need to like, do their thing. And a lot of times men can't hold that. And I'm not saying it's always their job. It's definitely not. We need to be way more responsible with our process. But I think generally what you're asking me right now is what I hear you saying is that woman or that girl really is unconsciously asking you to hold space, to see, hold, and hear her. And generally the way it works, right, is a guy, a masculine, they want to like solve, fix, provide, So basically what generally happens when a man, like when a woman comes to a man like that, is the guy wants to fix it and the woman just wants to be heard.
So you asked
So
if she wants to be heard, helped, or hugged.
I mean, and you don't even in a way, it's maybe at a certain point you could ask that, but at the beginning you could just be like, oh yeah, seen, held, safe, no threat, heard,
But
there's a
this, like, that's only exactly like at the beginning, or in the sense of it's just like a random person, not random as in, it could just be like a friend. Like you may not have like a close relationship with that person, but you just notice that someone just got triggered.
yeah,
Like it's like a deep autonomous response, and it's you mean even in that regular sense where it's
not
you
regular.
can't, yeah.
It's like I guess it's a question of that if that's what you want to provide, if you really want to
Mm.
use your energy that way. But I would say generally that's what she's asking for, is like just to have a container of being heard. It's not about most of the time, like in feminine masculine relationships, she just doesn't want to be seen as crazy. She doesn't want you to find a solution. She just wants you to hold space for her to, as they say, empty the basket or like vent. That's honestly, and of course, like then we go into what you also said, which is like, how do you do that and then help them resolve this deeper core need or this wounding over the long term and
Mhm.
like actually be healed. That's a whole another thing, honestly, which
Yeah.
I
I mean, step one is
definitely.
just to open up the door for her to see that that's what it is. And then the healing can happen, you know?
Mm,
So if you
mm,
can just like open the door for her to see and to
mm.
admit, then you've changed things already.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you have to be careful of how, depends on your relationship. You have to be careful of how fast you go to like showing her that she's being irrational or whatever the words are, that she's coming from her triggers or like what's really happening here for her to admit. Like you have to be careful of how fast you go there because that again could be seen as, instead of just being seen, felt, held, and safe and heard, it's like fixing,
Hmm.
or like not really, or being shown how you're like irrational or not grounded in reality,
But
which,
how does isn't that helpful to be, isn't that what it means to feel? It means you've been seen deeper than you see yourself.
yeah, absolutely. And some, like, I really feel like first of all, I don't think I do that anymore, but I also feel like whenever there's that solid, clear mirror, that's what I'm asking for. And that I really immediately, it like brings me back to myself. But you have layers of maturity and levels of development. It just really depends. You have to know that person enough, or at least, yeah. So it depends on um, how much unwinding is needed before they can like come right back to themselves.
Right. And so
Maybe I don't
yeah,
know.
and so for the people that are watching, the main thing is you recognize the willingness of the other person to do the work. And
There
if
you
it's
go.
somebody that is in your life and they are willing to do the work,
It can
then
happen really fast then.
yeah, because this is not like a one-time thing. It's gonna happen all the time. Like the wounds are like a minefield.
Hmm,
There,
nice.
and there are as many wounds as there are mines in the minefield, and you don't know how far the minefield extends because in front of you is a fog.
Nice.
So you
Well,
might as well assume the minefield goes on forever,
interesting.
at least until the course of this life ends. So how do
Interesting.
you handle that?
Hmm.
Or you ignore it. Most people just ignore it. They just don't even look at it. But as you walk through the minefield, there's a level of fulfillment that is to be gained. And
Hmm.
it's a minefield that when you walk across it, no one's going to give you any award or accolades.
Yeah, and
So one thing I want to say, before you finish it, this has nothing to do with your money, your muscles, or your clout, right?
nice.
But you can provide this, and if you provide this, you are in a whole other. You're providing access to a whole other dimension of fulfillment and growth.
So good. So freaking good. Yeah, I mean, personally, when you say the minefield thing and all of that, I almost, and I'm coaching right now a couple who is fairly young.
I know
Um,
them. I think that I
but
is it who I think it is?
yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I would say that there are just levels of development. So it really depends on, where you are, because I don't.
So I just want to say one of them was telling me, and she told me this. She said, "I feels like a blind mouse without it." So that is funny for me because we just talk about the minefield, and she was like, "I feel like I was a blind mouse without all this coaching."
Mhm.
And particularly in regards to like relationship, right? Because that was
And,
so, yeah,
and she's young, and
yeah.
her person's young, and she has definitely a couple of Kriya practices, but there isn't, but her journey with personal development has just begun. So I am, decades ahead of that. And I have spent the last 30 years of my life deeply in this work. So where like I am in terms of a relationship, ability to navigate relationship is a very different place than minefields, I feel. It's there's a level of,
I meant the wounding is a mine. The wound isn't mine,
I know
and
what
it can
you
hurt,
I
right,
know
when
you.
it's opened up. So that's why. But maybe at some point it transforms from minefield to a thorn to a bunch of thorny bushes, right? And then
Yeah,
it's some,
and
and then later on it
also,
transforms into something else, like a gorgeous garden with beautiful pathways. But you don't know until you start walking on the minefield through the fog.
it's
That's
true.
that's that's what the point is.
And it's beautiful. Like, and again, if we can do both of these things simultaneously, where we cultivate our deep connection and foundation in the ground of being, which is deeper than the personality, psychology, emotional level, and create some distance there. And then by understanding our dynamics in those more, minefield areas and releasing some of the accumulated physiological and energetic charge around when those get triggered, we really are able, I think, to navigate our lives and to not get as like overwhelmed and caught up in only that more, psychological, emotional, dynamic level. We just
It's not the
have,
only thing.
yeah,
It doesn't
it
become the glue.
it becomes the playground instead
Mm.
of like being almost like the maze. You know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah.
playground maze, and so I just want to say that because no matter what, we're all in it. This is like what we're doing. This is what we're here to do. So it's again, it's about your relationship with it. Like, is it playful? Isn't it adventure? Is it joyful? Is it exciting? Is it, revealing? It's like, ooh, what am I gonna find underneath that rock, And I was just in the Himalayas, and now I'm back right now in the US in the autumn, and it's nature is so spectacular and magnificent and mysterious and profound, and we are nature. So personally, I just think remaining in awe, in wonder, in curiosity at the profound, incredible beauty of it. Like, even the fact that somehow what we were talking about earlier, vasanas and fragrance, this incredible freaking universe puts you together with people in a relationship who have like exactly the things to like amplify and mirror your issues. It's
Hmm.
insane. How does that work? It's so cool. So I think, to me, it's like being in like awe about that. It's a gift. Okay, like, yeah, it can be intense, painful, so like hard, but it's an incredible gift. It really is. So that's how I will end my contribution to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because even I was thinking about that, about the vasanas and the contribution, and how there is a path for everyone that is unique. And for anybody that looks from the outside in, it's very difficult and impossible even to understand unless they have certain depth and they're willing to actually look.
Hmm.
And otherwise, at least for me, what I noticed is up until recently, I was trying to get a sense of even approval to ensure that what I'm doing is the right thing. So I talk about a conversation I had today with my co-founders in the morning, and one of them was asking, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go here." I was like, "This is what we should do. We should all come together in one place." And the other guy was like, "No, Are you? Is that the? Do you think that's the best thing for us to do, considering how much money we're making, and uh, also it's not possible for us to get. I have to choose between one of them." Because they're in totally different countries. So I have to choose between one of them. And then then I said to him, I said, well, there's no best thing. I don't know what the best thing is. You're asking the wrong question. If you ask me what's the best thing, I'm gonna tell you I don't know. But what I would instead say is I'm a human being. I have certain ways that I can improve myself, and there's certain ways for me to show up and contribute better. I can't look at it objectively and say that if we do this, this is going to happen, because it's not a mechanical thing. As human beings, we need certain kind of inspiration. We need certain kind of environments. We need to create a certain kind of situation for things to happen, right? It's not a mechanical thing. At some point, it can be mechanical for certain phases, but we're not in a phase right now for Shutterly. We're not in that kind of a phase where we have like, okay, these are the mechanical things. If we just do this, then it's going to be like great. But we're in a phase prior to that, which is just, there's no way to navigate this. The only way you do this is you set your priority and you move forward with that. That's literally the only thing. We know what that is, right? We discussed what that is, and we got some hard metrics on that at the end of that conversation too. But this was the most important thing. So because earlier for me it was, are we doing the right thing? And the approval I would seek years ago even was uh, based on the comparison of how others did it. But then you realize, like, hey, just because others did it like this doesn't mean it's going to work for us, because that particular situation of that particular person is never going to happen ever in existence again the same way, because the existence is constantly moving, and that same situation is not going to happen. We can definitely take inspiration from it, but there's no way in hell we can try to replicate that same action. It's not possible. Instead, we have to look at what should be the priority where we are at right now and how should we move forward, even if it doesn't make sense. But that's the sensible way to do it. Be sensible, don't do what makes sense. I tweeted that once, but this applies. In order to do that, you have to let go of a bunch of ideas within yourself and just focus on what matters.
And
I
yeah,
think, yeah. Are we done for today? Man, like that was boom.
that was a long conversation. So good job. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.